Apple, we got Microsoft, we got Amazon.com, you got Google's owner Alphabet. I mean, that $1 trillion number, pretty staggering. And the market capitalization.
So if someone wants a leader, is it better to find a general or an admiral?
That's like asking me to say, who do you love more, your son or your daughter?
I'm Mark Crumpton with Bloomberg's First Word News. A United Nations report says the world is still headed for catastrophic levels of global warming, even after a slew of new national climate pledges. The study says that if countries don't quickly set stronger emissions reduction targets, the world will warm 2.7 degrees Celsius or 4.9 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. The report comes just ahead of the climate summit in Glasgow, Scotland. New York and the rest of the Northeast are at risk of flooding after a weather system dumped record rain on northern California. Flood watches run from southern New Jersey to eastern Massachusetts as heavy rain could sweep the region through Wednesday. A low-pressure system in the Midwest will kick off the rain and will be joined by a second storm forming off the Atlantic coast later this week. ExxonMobil is considering salary increases as it tries to stop employee attrition across its business divisions following sweeping job and benefit cuts. Chief Executive Officer Darren Woods told employees at a town hall-style meeting that they should be encouraged by the ongoing salary review process. Woods did not give any indication as to the size of any pay increase or which employees would be eligible. Microsoft says the hackers behind the SolarWinds cyber attack are engaged in a fresh campaign to compromise global networks by targeting the tech supply chain. Microsoft attributes the attack to a group called Nobelium. Microsoft says more than 140 technology service providers and resellers have been notified as targets. This is happening despite U.S. sanctions put in place last April. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Markets, the close.
We go right into commodities. This is what my sixth day, Caroline.
Yeah,
it's a big
quite
deal.
the trot.
Romaine is out again. I did it for him last week. Let's see how we do. We're taking a look at crude actually now a little bit lower on the day. We were higher earlier because Saudi Arabia had cautioned a little bit on some supplies, which had pushed the market higher. Getting a little bit of a reprieve today. You're off about 0.2%. Gold, you're seeing a little bit of an increase here as we've been talking about some of these inflationary fears that are still front and center for the markets. Wheat futures, you're looking at those rising 0.6%, a 2-month high now. You talk about massive global demand and then stretched supplies due to, some harvests that were hit by bad weather. And we leave it off with nat gas. Caroline, you mentioned this earlier. Take a look at this. Here in the U.S., you're up almost 12%. Weather looks really cold in November, and gas stockpiles are already low. You've had a pretty mild October, which allowed some of those stockpiles to increase just a little bit. But reports are November could be pretty chilly.
Yeah, extraordinary moves once again in the natural gas space as we worry about the energy crisis, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the US. And of course, the energy crisis sort of feeds into our ongoing talk about the supply chain crisis as well. We brought you a special coverage. Remember that? Last week, live from the port of Long Beach in California, where a record number of cargo ships are waiting to unload. But the chain doesn't end there. Joining us for an exclusive interview is Michael Nue, the CEO of the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority. His agency is responsible for the rail corridor serving the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Beach. Extraordinary, the scenes that we saw over there, the innovation, thinking outside the box, being able to pile up containers more on top of each other to be able to, well, deal with the glut of empty containers, deal with the inability to, well, maneuver our goods around. What are you making in the current situation, Michael? What are you doing within your rail stock to be able to try and alleviate it?
Hi, Caroline. Well, what Alameda Corridor does is we connect to the ports and move that cargo away from the ports by rail and onto the Class 1 railroads, BNSF and Union Pacific. So, our goal is to move the cargo as expeditiously as possible. You talked about the empties. They do need to be brought to the terminal and stored. But really, the goal is to keep the cargo moving, get it off the ships, on the terminals, and out. So that's where Alameda Corridor provides a link from the ports to the rest of the country.
We've been hearing, of course, that a lot of the hiccups right now are coming not just in the boats off the port, of course, but the truck drivers who were either waiting in line to offload some of the empty trucks or cargo and maybe are waiting in line for hours, if not days at a time. Where do you see that biggest congestion, and is there a solution?
Yeah, so, whenever you get this much cargo stacked up at the terminals, you're going to get some chock-a-block in your operations. So trying to get those containers onto trucks is more complicated when there's this much cargo sitting in. As far as where the congestion is, I think that's really the critical question. The ports are moving record volumes, so the throughput that's actually moving through these ports, even though you see stagnation with the ships offshore, are at record volumes. Those terminals are moving more than they've ever moved before. Similarly with Alameda Corridor, our volumes moving through the corridor by rail are at record levels. So it is moving. The backlog that's being caused is really not due to constraints at the ports. Our terminals have the capacity to handle this. Our rail lines certainly have the capacity to move cargo out of the ports. What's happening is much further into the supply chain. You've got inland rail yards that are congested, and really I think those inland rail yards have capacity as well. It gets to the end of the supply chain. Where is this cargo trying to go? And it's really the warehouses that are full, and so there's nowhere for the cargo to flow into. So the overall logistics system is like a pipeline.
So
even though the size of these pipelines is adequate,
right,
there's a block at the end of it.
Michael, how long does this problem continue on for, given that so many parts of the supply chain are feeling that logjam? I think a lot of people are wondering, how does this all end?
So as I said, we're moving a lot of cargo, and we do see some positive signs. The backlog of cargo, that's how long the containers sit on the terminal before they get taken out. The backlog of the rail cargo that we're handling has gone down by 50% over the last month, and it's only a third of what it was 2 months ago. So we're seeing some positive signs that cargo is flowing and it's improving. I think we're in this for the long haul, though. We could be looking at these ships stacking up for months. So it's certainly nothing that's going to get solved before Christmas.
Michael, it's certainly got the attention of the administration. It's got the attention of all the different experts trying to be brought together. What we really got a sense of down at the Port of Long Beach was that everyone had a slightly different take on what's going wrong. Are people being brought together enough? Are you being able to discuss with the representatives of the trucking industry, with the representatives of the ports, with the representatives of the in-country railroads, that you're able to come up with a solution faster than you otherwise would be?
Certainly, from my aspect of the project is looking at the rail volume. So certainly we've had collaboration with BNSF and Union Pacific to address this issue, and I think that resulted in the positive trends that I had mentioned. I know the ports are very involved in every aspect of trying to improve this. Going to 24/7 was something that was seen as a solution, and I think we've got to do everything we can. But really, as I said, it's a matter of downstream what's happening in the pipeline. So that's really our improvements to go 24/7 will only be an ultimate solution as you get the downstream problem solved.
The big question, too, is how does this end? You said, of course, it won't be fixed by Christmas, but this has highlighted how for lack of a better word, how thinly run we were. There was literally no room for error. Do you see a long-term solution coming out of this of beefing up some of the fat on the sideline so that if there is a hiccup, the whole thing doesn't fall apart again?
Yeah, I think part of the issue is how the logistics systems are responding. So there was a certain level of panic as these volumes came up, and warehouses had to respond. And so some of that response behavior needs to be adjusted. I think the ports, as I said, are performing really well. And both LA and Long Beach continue to invest heavily in increasing their capacity, anticipating growth in the future. So really it's a logistics supply chain response that's needed. And I think that'll come. The whole industry is very focused on that.
Well, we sure hope it comes. Michael Louie, CEO of the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority, thank you for joining us. And still ahead, another big story that we're talking about this hour, Tesla hitting a $1 trillion market cap just after a Bloomberg scoop showing that Hertz purchased 100,000